High-value target. From the bridge of the Blood Oath, Captain Koroth Valon stood with his arms clasped behind his back, staring down at the chaotic sprawl of Ironspire below. The city shimmered faintly under Calathea IV's sea, a patchwork of ambition and decay. From this height, it was an insect colony, ceaseless movement with no apparent direction, a fitting battlefield. "An ugly place," his exo muttered. "Barely worth the fuel we've spent getting here." Valon didn't answer. "Its value isn't in aesthetics, it's what lies beneath." The Blood Oath's hollow display flickered to life, casting a cold blue glow over the bridge. Icons illuminated the city's disjointed districts, but one brighter than the rest: the location of their objective. "Status of defenses near the target," Valon asked, his voice sharp. "All recon units are in position," the ship's AI, Kala, replied smoothly. "Scout mechas stand by in the industrial zone. No significant resistance detected in the vicinity of the target." Valon's steel-gray eyes narrowed as he studied the data. Ironspire was a breeding ground for opportunists and mercenaries. Its defendant minimal now, but this place had a way of birthing complications. Below, the market district pulsed with life. Vendors crowded the streets, shouting over each other as they hawked everything from counterfeit tech to street trays of alien cuisine. The air was thick with the smell of burnt oil and spices, a blend that spoke to the city's grit and resilience. Beneath the surface bustle, however, was a quiet tension. Whispers passed from stall to stall like contraband. A fleet had been spotted descending through the planet's atmosphere. The Dominion was coming. Above them, in the gleaming Spire district, corporate elites went about their routines, oblivious to the unease below. From their penthouse towers, the market was little more than a blur of noise and movement, far removed from their polished halls and automated luxuries. The city's concerns were not their concerns. Ironspire might as well have been two different worlds. In the outlands, where shanty towns sprawled beyond the city's borders, scavengers and nomads gazed skyward. The Dominion's fleet's faint glimmers were visible even here, distant but unmistakable. They watched and waited, too accustomed to hardship to act without certainty. This place had survived many storms, but none had come with such ominous purpose. Valon retreated to his quarters, the hollow display following him. The room was stark, its only adornments a Dominion insignia and a utilitarian desk. The glowing map cast harsh shadows across his face as he studied the surrounding districts. "Fleet Admiral Huron is demanding immediate results," Kala's voice interrupted. "Failure cannot be tolerated." "It never is," Valon coolly, his eyes flicking back to the map. The market district was a hive of smuggling and lawlessness, but their target, a nondescript building near the district's heart, was unlikely to be guarded by anything more than mercenaries. The Dominion would strike hard and fast, leaving no time for the city's factions to respond. The Admiral's orders had been clear: recruit Zynara Solan. Her work in cloning and gene manipulation could not fall into enemy hands. She had been an enigma for years, disappearing after her defection from the Solar Syndicate. That had been just here was more than a coincidence. It was an opportunity. Valon straightened, his jaw set. "Deploy the recon team. I want this operation completed by the next cycle." In the heart of the market district, Thraxar Ironclaw moved through the throng with practiced ease. His cybernetic arm, a sleek blend of polished steel and black coating, caught the occasional glint of light, but few paid him any mind. He preferred it that way. He stopped at a vendor's stall, picking up a worn datapad displaying outdated star charts. He wasn't interested in the charts. The glowing notification on his bracer was what held his attention. "Thraxar," the message began. "High-value contract available. Contact me for details. Standard terms apply. Priority target, Zynara Solan. Details on location included upon acceptance. Payment guaranteed." The sender was a fixer he'd worked with before, someone who knew how to keep their clients anonymous. That suited Thraxar just fine. He didn't need to know who wanted Solan, only that they were willing to pay. He pocketed the datapad and walked on, his sharp features unreadable. The fixer's message wasn't surprising. The name Solan had been circulating among high-end contracts for weeks, but he hadn't expected her to be here. Ironspire was chaos incarnate, but that same chaos offered him options. The Dominion, the city's criminal syndicates, even Solan herself, any one of them could make this worthwhile. Thraxar's allegiance was to the highest bidder, and his reputation was a wild card made him both feared and invaluable. For now, he would let the pieces move into place. In a cramped alley near the market's edge, a cloaked figure approached a hidden entrance. They knocked twice, then 3 times in quick succession. Inside the lab, Dr. Zynara Solan flinched as the sound echoed through the room. She hesitated before opening the door, her cautious eyes meeting those of a scrappy-looking courier. "They found you," the courier said breathlessly, shoving a datapad into her hands. "Dominion recon teams are already in the district." Solan's heart raced as she scanned the pad. The Dominion. She had always known the day would come, but seeing the data, scouts, troop movements, their methodical approach, made it real in a way she hadn't prepared for. "I need protection," she muttered, her voice tight. Her fingers hovered over her comm as she brought up a contact she'd hoped never to use. Thraxar's name flashed on the screen. She hesitated for only a moment before sending the message. If anyone could keep her out of the Dominion's grasp, it was him. She just had to hope she could afford him. Outside, in the myriad of alleys of Ironspire, 4 Dominion scout mechas stood like sentinels at the edge of the market district, their dark exteriors shimmering faintly under Ironspire's muted light. Inside their cockpits, the Dominion recon teams synchronized their systems, their helmets glowing with tactical overlays. "Approaching designated location," the onboard AI of the lead mecha announced in its neutral, dispassionate tone. "Mission parameters loaded. Initiating disembarkation sequence." With a hiss of hydraulics, the cockpit hatches opened outward. The recon leader attached a cable to his harness and swung himself to the ground with practiced efficiency. One by one, the rest of the team followed, their black exo-armor glinting faintly under the distant fires of the Dominion assault. "Unit lockdown engaged," the AI declared as the last soldier touched down. The soldiers moving in formation, their plasma rifles sweeping the area for threats. Behind them, the towering mechas became inert shadows, their towering frames humming softly as they powered down. Above them, the Dominion fleet lit the sky. Firepower. Dropships descended through the haze, disgorging troops into key areas of Ironspire. Bombardments ripped through industrial zones and residential hubs, each strike calculated to cripple resistance and sow panic. The Dominion's objection: seize control of Ironspire and secure its value as a staging ground for future assaults against the rimward independent states. The planet's strategic location made it ideal for launching campaigns deeper into the RIS's fragmented territory. Yet, the broader assault served another purpose: creating cover for small teams tasked with critical operations. On board the Blood Oath, Captain Koroth Valon reviewed the live feed of the bombardments. Smoke curled into the atmosphere, faint blips on the holomap marking Dominion troop deployments. "Kala," Valon said, his voice calm amid the chaos, "adjust Phase 2 timelines for all districts. I want the staging areas secured for the next cycle." "Yes, Captain," the AI replied. "Ground forces report minimal resistance." Valon nodded, though he remained wary. Ironspire was chaos incarnate, a place where resistance could coalesce from nothing. Every move had to be precise. There was no room for error. Inside her lab, Dr. Zynara Solan watched the chaos unfold on her monitors. The Dominion's incursion had begun, and their movements were far too calculated to be random. She knew what they were after. They were here for her. Her gaze flickered, datapad in her hands. The culmination of years of work. Cloning technology was no mystery to the Syndicate Council. The core guilds and corporations, the highest echelons of the syndicate, had perfected systems for cloning their top brass. For them, the near-zero success rate wasn't a hindrance, it was a calculated expense. The syndicate's resources allowed them to create and maintain backup copies of their leaders, an insurance policy against mortality. But outside the Council's influence, cloning was a different story. The cost was astronomical, the failures catastrophic. Her research had changed that. It hadn't made cloning accessible, but it had laid the groundwork for stabilizing the process. In the right hands, it could shift cloning from a rare privilege to a dangerous tool. In the wrong hands, it could remake warfare. Solan's hand trembled as she considered the implications. Destroying the research would end the Dominion's hunt, but it would also erase everything she had worked for. Leaving it behind was equally unthinkable. The Solar Syndicate had burned her reputation once. She couldn't let anyone else turn her work into a weapon. Outside, amidst the chaos of the invasion, Thraxar moved through the chaotic streets of the market district, his cybernetic arm flexing as he keyed a response into his bracer. The air was thick with smoke and the cries of civilians fleeing the bombardments, but the mercenary remained calm. Chaos was his element. His comm buzzed as the fixer's contact patched through. Solan's voice came through, tight with urgency. "I need protection," she said. "I can pay. Double your standard rate. Just get here." Thraxar grinned, though his tone remained neutral. "A bit late to be calling me, Doctor. Dominion scouts are already in the area." "I don't care," she snapped. "If they get me, my work ends up in their hands." "And if I don't make it in time?" Thraxar asked, his tone almost teasing. "I'll add a bonus if you keep them out," Solan said, her voice wavering with desperation. "Anything you want. Just get here." Thraxar chuckled, sending back a single-word reply. "Understood." He pocketed the device and moved faster. The Dominion wouldn't waste time, and Solan's offer was too good to pass up. Besides, this wasn't just about her research. It was about leverage. Whoever controlled Solan controlled her breakthroughs, and Thraxar planned to make sure he was the one holding the cards when the dust settled. Outside the lab, the Dominion recon team crept closer, their movements synchronized and deliberate. The sound of bombardments and panic masked their approach, but their focus remained unbroken. The target was near. "Target building in sight," the recon leader for the comm, proceeding with breach. Inside, Solan froze, her breath catching as she saw dark figures moving in her external cameras. She grabbed her comm again, her voice trembling as she called Thraxar. "They're here," she hissed. "Hurry!" Thraxar's reply was casual, almost amused. "Relax, Doctor. Just keep the door open for me." The line went dead, leaving Solan with nothing but the pounding of her heart. She grabbed her field pack and her datapad, her mind racing. She couldn't stop them, not alone. But maybe, just maybe, she'd bought herself enough time. The Dominion recon marketplace around them was a patchwork of chaos, abandoned stalls, overturned carts, and fires sparked by the broader assault. Civilians fled in every direction, their shouts blending into the distant rumble of bombardments and the heavy thud of troop carriers landing in the industrial zone. The team leader gestured sharply, and the squad converged on the narrow alley leading to the target. The building was unassuming, tucked between two aging warehouses with rust streaks running down their metal facades. To the untrained eye, it was just another forgotten structure in Ironspire, but the Dominion knew better. "Scanner sweep," the leader ordered. One of the soldiers raised a small handheld device, its display flickering as it swept the building for signs of life. "Signal," the soldier reported, his voice calm despite the tension in the air. "Non-combatant." The leader nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Breach protocol. Quiet entry. No collateral." The team fanned out, taking up positions around the entrances. The leader approached the main door, his rifle's barrel pointing downward as he reached for the breaching tool on his belt. The Dominion prided itself on precision, and this operation would be no different. Solan crouched behind a workbench, her datapad clutched tightly to her chest. The faint sound of footsteps outside the building made her heart race. They were here. She knew it. Her comm buzzed, and she nearly dropped it in her haste to answer. "Thraxar," she whispered. "Close, Doctor," his voice replied, smooth and unhurried. "Keep calm. Just a few more minutes." "We don't have a few minutes," she hissed, her eyes darting towards the live feed on the monitor, where the dark shapes of the recon team moved with chilling precision. "They're already at the door." "Relax," Thraxar said. "They're not getting you unless I let them." The line went dead again, leaving Solan in the oppressive of her lab. Her eyes fell to the hidden compartment beneath her workstation. It wasn't part of the original lab design. It was something she'd installed herself, a contingency for moments like this. Her fingers trembled as she opened the compartment, revealing a small control panel. She hesitated for a long moment before keying in the sequence. A low hum resonated through the walls, and tiny red lights flickered to life along the ceiling. She closed the compartment just as the lab's main door shuddered under the force of the Dominion's breaching tool. The Dominion team entered swiftly and without hesitation, their movements silent and efficient. Their rifles swept the room as they cleared it section by section, their visors casting faint glows on the dim light of the lab. "Target acquired," one of the soldiers reported, his scanner fixed on a heat signature behind the workbench. The recon leader signaled for the others to hold position as he approached. "Dr. Solan," he said, his voice filtered through his helmet. "You are now under Dominion protection. Surrender your research and come with us. Resistance is not advised." Behind the workbench, Solan clutched the datapad tighter, her breath shallow. The moment stretched, the tension thickening with every second of silence. Then, the hum changed pitch. The leader's visor flickered as the room plunged into chaos. A sudden burst of light erupted from the far corner of the lab, followed by a deafening screech as the laser turret she had concealed in the ceiling activated. Its beam sliced through the air, striking one of the soldiers before they could react. "Turret!" somebody shouted, their voice sharp with urgency. The team scrambled for cover, their precision and calm fracturing under the sudden onslaught. The laser turret pivoted smoothly, tracking its target with deadly efficiency. Another soldier fell, their armor useless against the concentrated energy. Outside the building, Thraxar approached at a measured pace, his cybernetic arm flexing as he readied his weapon. The sounds of chaos from within the lab brought a smile to his lips. Solan wasn't defenseless after all. Smart woman. He glanced towards the inert scout mecha standing at the edge of the alley. The Dominion had been thorough, leaving them behind in lockdown mode, but Thraxar was no stranger to their systems. He filed the observation away for later. An escape plan might involve commandeering one. Reaching the lab's main entrance, he paused to assess the situation. The turret's hum and the occasional sharp report of Dominion rifles told him the team was still alive, but just barely. Thraxar keyed into Solan's comm. "Doctor, I'm here. Don't be a dear and open it for me." Inside, Solan hesitated, her mind racing. She didn't trust him, not entirely, but the turret wouldn't hold forever. Her fingers danced over the controls, overriding the security system and unlocking the entrance. The door slid open, and Thraxar stepped in, his sharp eyes immediately scanning the room. The recon leader turned towards the sound, raising his rifle, but Thraxar was faster. A single plasma bolt struck the soldier's chest, sending him sprawling to the ground. "Always clean up after your messes, Doctor," Thraxar said, his tone light as he ducked behind the rope bench. "You think this is my fault?" Solan snapped, her voice trembling with fear and anger. "You called me," he replied, loading a fresh energy cell into his weapon. "Let's just say you made an investment." The remaining soldiers regrouped, their rifles now trained on both the turret and Thraxar. The leader, though injured, barked orders, his tone laced with urgency. The turret hissed as it pivoted, firing another scorching beam that forced the soldiers to scatter. Thraxar smirked, his cybernetic fingers curling around a grenade at his belt. "Time to finish this." He lobbed the grenade with practiced precision, sending it rolling towards the cluster of soldiers. A sharp explosion followed, silencing the Dominion team for good. In the sudden quiet, the turret powered down, its energy reserves depleted. Solan exhaled shakily, her back against the workbench as she tried to process the chaos. Thraxar stood, brushing down his coat. "Well, Doctor, that's one problem solved. What's next?" Dr. Solan behind the workbench, her breathing uneven as she stared at the ruined remains of the Dominion recon team. Smoke curled lazily from the shattered turret in the corner, its final shot having drained it of power. The lab was quiet now, but the tension in the air was suffocating. Thraxar stood by the door, casually reloading his plasma rifle. His cybernetic arm gleamed in the distant light as he adjusted his gear. A whir of servers breaking the silence. He glanced at Solan, his expression unreadable. "Well, Doctor," he said, his voice light. "Looks like that's round one." Solan's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" He held up a small scanner taken from one of the Dominion soldiers. Its display flickered with red dots, moving steadily towards their location. "Reinforcements. Big ones. They'll be here soon." Her stomach clenched. "Then we need to leave." Thraxar shook his head. "You need to stay." "What?" Her voice rose incredulous. "You just said they're coming." "Exactly," he replied, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "And if you run now, they'll hunt you down before you make it to the next district. You'll have a better chance if you stay put. Let them think you're still protected." She stared at him, anger and panic warring in her expression. "You're leaving me." He smirked, his sharp features cutting through the haze of smoke. "Not for long. Someone's got to keep those reinforcements busy. Better me than you." Before she could argue, he keyed into his bracer and brought up a schematic of the area. The scout mecha stood inert just outside the lab, their massive frames a dark silhouette against the chaos of the market district. Thraxar grinned. "They left their toys behind," he said. "Dominion lockdown protocols are tough, but I've cracked harder." "You're going to fight them?" Solan asked, disbelief creeping into her voice. He shrugged. "Fighting's one word for it, distracting another. Call it a favor." Her anger bubbled to the surface. "And what do you get out of this, Thraxar?" He glanced at her, his grin fading slightly. "You called me doctor. That means you've got something worth protecting. I make sure you live long enough to make it worth my while." Before she could reply, he moved to the door. "Seal the place behind me. Reinforce it. If I don't come back, consider this my early resignation." The moment Thraxar stood aside, the chaotic sounds of the market district rushed back to meet him. Smoke and fire framed the scene, casting an eerie glow over the abandoned scout mechas. He approached the nearest one, his fingers working quickly on the override panel embedded in its leg. "Come on," he muttered, the bracer on his cybernetic arm syncing with the mecha systems. "Show me something useful." The mecha hummed softly, its lights flickering to life. Thraxar grinned. "There we go." He climbed into the cockpit, the controls responding sluggishly as he forced the Dominion's lockdown protocols to comply. The viewport lit up, revealing the approaching reinforcements, a mix of heavier units mixed in coordinated formation towards the lab. "Let's make this interesting," he said, gripping the controls. The mecha surged forward, its massive legs shaking the ground. Thraxar fired its integrated plasma cannons, the burst ripping through the lead units of the Dominion force. Soldiers scrambled for cover, their formations fracturing under the sudden assault. In the chaos, Thraxar maneuvered the mecha with surprising precision, using its bulk as both a weapon and a shield. Plasma bolts rained down from the Dominion forces, but the mecha's armor absorbed the brunt of the attack. Back in the lab, Solan sealed the door, her fingers trembling as she activated the remaining security protocols. The sound of the mecha's weapons echoed faintly through the walls, each explosion a reminder of how close the danger was. She sat on the floor, the datapad clutched to her chest. Alone again. She hated it. Hated replying like Thraxar. Hated feeling so powerless. But there was nothing she could do now except wait. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could she trust him to come back? Or would he leave her here, taking the Dominion's attention with him and disappearing into Ironspire's shadows? The thought sent a chill down her spine. The lab was a mess, smoke-stained walls, shattered consoles, and the remains of the turret that had been her last line of defense. But it was still intact, still hidden enough to buy her some time. She drew in a shaky breath and began reviewing the datapad's contents. It was all she had left, She needed to make it count. Outside, the battle reached its peak. Thraxar pushed the mecha to its limits, the cockpit shaking with every hit it took. The Dominion reinforcements had regrouped, their heavier units closing in on his position. "Time to go," he muttered. He activated the mecha's self-destruct sequence, setting the timer for 30 seconds. With a practiced motion, he popped the hatch and swung himself out, landing on the ground as the machine stood motionless. He didn't wait to watch the explosion. He melted into the chaos of the market district, disappearing into the shadows with the same ease he had entered. His breath beeped softly, displaying a map of the district's underground passages. He smirked. "Good luck, Doctor," he murmured before vanishing into Ironspire. In the lab, the sound of battle faded into silence. Solan remained on the floor, her back against the wall. She didn't know if Thraxar had succeeded or if he was even alive, but for now the Dominion wasn't at her door. She glanced at the monitor. The mechas outside were still powering down, their towering frames motionless in the rubble-strewn street. The lab was quiet, but the tension lingered. Solan tightened the grip on the datapad. Her resolve hardened. She was alone, but she would survive. She always had.